So how is it that you sit on an FDA board? What does that mean even?
It is funny, I'm the consumer rep, so I represent the public on the FDA Psychopharmacologic Drugs Advisory Committee. It is the advisory board, just like the ones that were reviewing the vaccine. This one is for all the psychiatric drugs. And it is a place where the FDA, if they have questions or if there's something they want to tease out, they convene a board of, a lot of them are researchers or academia that are looking at science, and then I'm the consumer rep. And it's a great opportunity. It's been a really big, eye-opening experience to see drugs coming to market, how they're using fast-tracking mechanisms, which is kind of what the emergency use authorization was, right? But there's been a whole slew of new drugs that are coming using accelerated approval, which you think is innovation, breakthrough. But what it really means is less rigorous clinical trials and less focus on safety. And I take my job really serious on this committee because I look back at the 1991 advisory committee that I now am a member of. Every one of those people took funds from pharma when they said, nope, we don't see any link between antidepressants and violence and suicide. So if they had done their job, I probably wouldn't be here, right? Mm-hmm. And so I do take the safety perspective, I take the real world perspective, because I'm seeing so many of the drugs coming in with small clinical trials, right? So I do care about what happens when it gets on the market. Our system is really set up to bring products on market. We love more in America. We want to sell everything. And so we want more drugs on the market, but we need to be really careful because there's real life consequences to these decisions. So I still laugh that I'm actually on this board with being as vocal as I am about safety. But I think it's a really important place to be.
Do you ever find yourself in a situation where you have all these, industry or revolving door people on one of these advisory boards, and they just want to be able to say, hey, we have Kim Witczak on the board, Witczak, so we're all good here, right? Everything's legit and above board because Kim's around. What do you think?
Well, sometimes I do wonder if I'm the token safety person. But again, if it's being used or not, I know the role that I play. And sometimes it may just be something that's on the record that comes down the road that there was somebody who actually did question these, medications. Being on this role, to me, it's more than just the trials. It's also, having a background in marketing and advertising, and how I just see the world. So when I get a new project, we have to go do a full 360 investigation on how it, what's the good, bad, the ugly, to, take on a new product. And so my mind just naturally thinks that way. So I love being on the committee, although it's very frustrating at times because I may be the only no vote. And I often tell people, if you've never observed an FDA advisory board meeting of any kind of drug, you should actually go back and listen. So the first part of the day, it's, the sponsors give their presentation of their data. The FDA will do their analysis of the data, and the committee gets to question. There's an open public hearing where members of the public can come and give their perspective. And then there is the questions at hand that the FDA wants to know, do you think the efficacy is there, the safety? And then we get to vote. And I always say, go back and listen to the explanation, not the vote. And this is what I'm also trying to get the mainstream media. Don't just report that 17-2 approved it. Go back and listen to the explanations, because often you will find the person who voted yes, they'll say, I voted yes for this product. I don't think safety is as good as it should be, but I think we need it on the market. And then they'll come to me. Well, I voted no. I don't think safety is there. And so that explanation is really important, and I would highly recommend people just go. It's a very interesting educational process. And it's also where you learn how much pharma actually influences things that you don't think are obvious, like the patient groups that show up at these FDA meetings, and where they get their funding.
Okay, so let's explore that, right? You're talking about what are ostensibly nonprofits or something in that vein, supposed to be independent groups that are looking at patient outcomes.
Yeah, so they might be representing a group of patients, right? They might be, like the Parkinson's Association or the American Heart Society or National Alliance for Mentally Ill. They're all nonprofits representing the disease or, the disease group. And almost you could go to any of these hearings and they have become almost mouthpieces for pharmaceutical industry, where they're like, we need this for our patients. There's the work that gets done for the people, but then you go and look at the funding. Two different parts of the business, right? Go look at the funding, and it's almost all pharmaceutical funding. And I think it's really important with anything that we do, whether it's patients groups, who are the fact checkers, where's funding coming from, So that was a big aha. We like to call them AstroTurf groups, because they seem, like they're real. And they do good, legitimate work, but you have to take that with a grain of salt. So that is one of those other areas that I have learned where pharma's influence is pretty deep.
I mean, basically, you're talking about a situation where, they're strongly motivated, arguably, to give the outcome that the pharma would like, because pharma provides some large portion of their funds. That's the idea.
Yep.
That's what you'd call a conflict of interest, right?
It seems like a conflict of interest to me. So so they'll sometimes have people who are in the clinical trials that would show up, but the funding, all their travel, everything's paid for. And of course they're gonna say that this drug, could have saved my loved one's life if it was available now. You could see how things can get easily manipulated. And I don't know if you had a chance to listen to any of the FDA or CDC advisory committee meetings that they've had during the last 2 years to do with the vaccines. It's very interesting to listen. I wish that they were in person, and I wish that the cameras were on, but the cameras were not on, so you can't actually see the emotional. But there were people that were like researchers that came, but they were under the guise of mom. Or I work for the company, but I have no conflict. I'm coming here as a mom. It was very interesting when you start looking at like the number of people who were actually talking during the open public hearing. And it seemed like there was some particular selection that was happening. And we'll never know because everything was Zoom, digital. And unlike, back in the day of many of the advisory committees, you had to actually show up. When you do everything remotely and there's something that you're missing. You're not getting the emotion of the people that are actually the injured that would have showed up to tell their story. But instead, during these last 2 years with the advisory committees, the cameras have been off.
So you're saying basically you think that there's people who would have shown up to a hearing maybe uninvited or something like that, whereas on these Zoom meetings just simply never get a say because they get edited out.